Ever wonder just when it was that dogs went from like howling at the moon to, napping on our couches?
Mm,
Well, today's deep dive, we're tackling that.
okay.
We're focusing on the history of dogs in Finland, believe it or not.
Okay.
He's given us a ton of research on this.
Yep.
And I have to say, I'm pretty intrigued. We've got Stone Age settlements, some sort of weird north-south divide, even hints of prehistoric sled dogs.
Right.
It's a canine mystery just waiting for us.
Yeah, what I think is so fascinating is how the story of dogs in Finland really adds this unique piece to, this global puzzle of how dogs were domesticated, right? It's not just about when dogs kind of show up in the picture, but it's how they, were integrated into all these different societies and environments, even within a region like we might think of geographically as unified like Finland.
Well, and right off the bat, the research kind of throws us for a loop here. We've got evidence of dog remains in southern Finland. They're over 10,000 years old, like practically as old as the first human settlements there. But here's the thing. For a long time, we don't find any dogs in the north in the archaeological digs. So what's with that?
Yeah, that north-south canine curtain, as it
Yeah.
were. It's
Yeah.
a good question. Well, one theory is that these early Finnish settlers were connected to cultures from the southeast, like the Veritai and Butovo cultures,
Okay.
where dogs were already like a part of life.
Yeah.
So imagine like these early migrations, maybe people were moving because of climate change, or they were looking for new resources,
Mm.
and they were bringing, not just other people, but, their dogs northward.
So they get to southern Finland. Maybe the landscape looks a little bit more like what they're used to, and they've got their dogs with them. But what were these dogs doing that made them so important to bring along?
Well, that's where the archaeology gets even more interesting, right? Because
Oh.
alongside these like early dog remains,
Mm.
archaeologists are finding evidence of like more advanced sled technology emerging in southern Finland.
Mhm.
And we're talking about sleds with runners that are way too large, way too robust to be pulled by people alone.
Mm. Okay, wait. So are we talking prehistoric sled dogs in Finland?
Potentially, yeah.
It's adorable and kind of mind-blowing. It really changes how we think about, early humans and their relationships with dogs. Are we talking about teams of like fluffy pups pulling sleds through the snow?
Right.
And if they were so important for travel, especially in the South, why were they left behind in the North? Or, were the conditions that different?
That's a good question. I mean, it's possible that the differences between, North and South, even way back then, they could have been really important.
Mhm.
Maybe the South with like denser forests and different prey animals, it may have just been more favorable to use sleds for certain
Yeah.
tasks.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, these early sled dogs, they may not have even been suited to the North. And we have to keep in mind that, dog domestication is a process. It's this back and forth,
Sure.
between humans and animals. And they're both adapting to each other, but also to their environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's easy to forget that even within Finland, there would have been variations in the environment. So you've got these like potential sled dogs helping their humans in the South. But were they just seen as like, furry tools, or did they have a deeper connection with these prehistoric Finns? You've got to think like these early settlers, they're relying on their dogs for so much. They're facing the elements together. That has to create a bond.
You're right. You're hitting on a really important point.
Yeah.
The relationship between humans and dogs in prehistoric Finland, it was probably way more complex than a simple like owner-pet dynamic, which is something we see in lots of ancient cultures.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
and a great example of this is this really cool discovery at a site called Jetboll, which is on Åland.
Okay.
And this site, it's from the Middle Neolithic period. It's about 5,000 years old.
Hmm.
And they found something really incredible there, dog bones. And these bones were found in ritual pits alongside human remains.
Wait, ritual pits. Like, what could
Wow.
that mean? What does that tell us about the role of dogs in these ancient Finnish societies, especially compared to, other parts of the world?
Well, I think, on the one hand, it tells us that there was something like deeply meaningful going on in this
Mm-hmm.
relationship. These weren't just tools or workers. These were beings that may have been connected to their spiritual beliefs, to their rituals,
Mm.
and maybe even to, what they thought happened after death.
Dog bones in ritual pits alongside human remains.
Hmm. That's wild. It makes you think twice about that whole man's best friend thing, doesn't it?
Definitely makes you think about it. The Jetbull site, for anyone who doesn't know, it's from this period called the Middle Neolithic, which in Finland was about 4,200 to 2,500 BC.
Okay.
And during that time, you see all these big changes happening, like different ways of burying people, pottery starts showing up and you have like society getting more complex.
Right.
So finding dog bones in these rituals, it tells us there was this deeper connection going on. It's like a puzzle that's getting more and more complicated with every piece we find. We've got sled dogs, ritual practices, but what about the dogs themselves? Did they look anything like the dogs we know?
There are clues. It's just well-preserved skeletons from back then. They're hard to come by. But we do have descriptions from places like Pitapudas, Sarajevo, Alavas, and Karava.
Okay.
And those descriptions, along with some bone fragments, they suggest some ancient Finnish dogs were like small to medium sized. People compare them to the Karelian bear dog sometimes.
So not those giant sled dogs hauling huge things.
Not necessarily. I mean, sled dogs come in different shapes and sizes, right? Depends on what they need to do. But what's really interesting is that the skeletons, they kind of hint at a Spitz-like ancestor for some of these dogs.
Wait, like the Finnish Spitz, the one that looks like a fluffy fox.
Yeah.
With that crazy bark.
Yeah, exactly. Like, descriptions say they were similar in size and build. That doesn't mean they were directly related, but it makes you wonder, right, about how long certain types of dogs have been in Finland.
It makes you wonder if those ancient Spitz-like dogs were already doing their thing, like, that yodeling bark they do at squirrels. I mean, it's not like that just came out of nowhere.
It's a good point. And it actually gets at something even bigger. This story of dogs in Finland, it's just one part of this huge saga, right? The whole story of how dogs were domesticated.
Oh, I thought we had that figured out. Like, weren't dogs domesticated from wolves somewhere in Europe thousands of years ago?
That's the main idea, yeah, based on the oldest dog bones we've found so far.
Okay.
But when it happened, where it happened, even how many times it happened, that's still up for debate. Big time.
Hold on. Multiple domestication events? You mean different groups of people, like becoming friends with different wolf packs in different parts of the world?
That's one theory, yep.
Uh-huh.
There's genetic studies that suggest dogs might have been domesticated not just once, but a bunch of times in different places, like even East Asia.
So instead of this one big aha moment where humans and wolves become buddies, it's more like this whole intertwined thing happening all over the place for thousands of years.
Exactly. And the evidence, well, it's not clear-cut. Looking at the fossil record is tricky, especially when you're dealing with early dogs that might not have looked that different from wolves.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think something we think we understand, like dogs, still has so many mysteries surrounding it.
Absolutely.
We've been talking about Finland, but you mentioned East Asia being another place where dogs might have been domesticated. How does that fit into all of this?
Okay, so multiple domestication events, debates about Europe versus Asia. It's like the whole dog origin story just got way more interesting.
It shows you, like, we're always learning new things about the past. New stuff pops up, we question old ideas, and the story just keeps getting more interesting.
And we were just about to dig into East Asia and how it might connect to dog domestication. So what kind of evidence makes people think dogs might have been domesticated there? Well, there's this genetic evidence. Some Asian breeds, like the Chinese dingo or the New Guinea singing dog, they seem to have split off from other dog lineages really early on.
Okay.
And that could mean they were domesticated separately, not from the same ancestors as European dogs.
So different groups of wolves, maybe with their own unique traits, becoming pals with humans in different parts of the world.
It's possible, right?
Yeah.
It's where things get really cool. Imagine different cultures, each with their own ways of doing things, living in different environments, and how that might have shaped those early dogs. It could explain why we see such a variety in ancient dog breeds, even in a place as small as Finland.
That's wild. So those Finnish dogs with their Spitz-like looks and, maybe even sledding skills, they could be from a totally different part of the dog family tree than dogs that were domesticated in East Asia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows just how complicated this whole thing is. It's not just one straight line from wolf to dog, but like this tangled web of relationships and adaptations and migrations, and it's happening over thousands of years on multiple continents.
Makes you wonder if those Finnish dogs were already doing some of the things modern breeds do, like that yodeling bark the Finnish Spitz is known for. Could that be something passed down from their ancestors from, like, way back?
People have been asking that question for ages. If you look at where they've found dog bones, they often find squirrel bones too, which makes you think that even those early dogs were hunting squirrels. Yeah.
And if that bark is specifically for hunting squirrels, I mean, it's not hard to imagine those ancient dogs doing the same thing.
Exactly. And it gets you thinking, what other things dogs do today might be rooted in those prehistoric times? Things like herding, guarding, even those puppy dog eyes. Could those be leftovers from long ago? Things that help dogs and humans survive together?
Wow. When you look at it that way, our dogs today, they aren't just the product of, breeding for certain looks. They're like a living history book showing us thousands of years of evolution of two species figuring out how to live together. And that's affected everything, how they look, how they act, even how they think.
Right. It speaks to how deep that bond between humans and dogs really is. A bond that started way before leashes or dog food, back when it was all about survival, working together, going through life side by side.
It's amazing that something like finding dog bones in Finland can lead to all this. It's not just about the history of dogs, but also about our own history, about how we became the humans we are today alongside these animals.
It reminds us that there are incredible stories hidden everywhere, even in the most unexpected places. Stories that make us question what we think we know, that help us understand the world better, that show us just how connected everything is.
Well said. I feel like I'm walking away with a whole new appreciation for dogs, for Finland, and for all the mysteries out there just waiting to be discovered. To everyone listening, we hope this got you thinking, maybe even spark some curiosity. Until next time, keep those tails wagging and those minds exploring.